This morning I was born again, and a light shines on my land. I no longer look for heaven in your deathly distant land. I do not want your pearly gates, I don't want your streets of gold. This morning I was born again, and a light shines in my soul. This morning I was born again, I was born again complete. I stood above my troubles, and I stand on my 2 feet. My hand, it feels unlimited, my body feels like the sky. I feel at home in the universe where yonder planets fly. This morning I was born again, my past is dead and gone. This great eternal moment is my great eternal dawn. Each drop of blood within me, each breath of life I breathe, is united with these mountains, and the mountains with the seas. Sun upon me, its rays crawl through my skin. I breathe the life of Jesus and old John Henry in. I give myself, my heart, my soul, to give some friend a hand. This morning I was born again, I am in the promised land. This morning I was born again, and a light shines on my land. I no longer look for heaven in your deathly distant land. I do not want your pearly gates, I don't want your streets of gold, and I do not want your mansion, and my heart is never cold.
Thank you, House Band. Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati. I am Barbara Bonney, one of 5 Barbara members at First Church, and I'm your worship associate for today. I want to extend a warm welcome this morning to our visitors. I'm happy you are here today, and I'm glad Dr. Riegel is back with us. Our faith community holds love at the center. We are committed to values of justice, compassion, and inclusion. Therefore, if you are an immigrant, a refugee undocumented, you are welcome here. Whatever your race, your ethnicity, whatever country you are from, whatever your religious background, you are welcome here. If you are gay or straight, bi, trans, non-binary, queer, you are welcome here. Whatever your abilities or disabilities, visible or invisible, you are welcome here. Whoever you are, your whole beautiful self is welcome here. We need each other, and it is good to be together. If you are visiting with us today, please join us for coffee after the service in the room directly across from our entrance. All are welcome. The flowers today are from Julia Almager to thank all who planned and will participate in the congregational meeting. Speaking of which, members, please note that the annual congregational meeting will be held after church today, starting at approximately 11:20. So don't linger in the coffee hour. Childcare will be provided. I also want to remind everyone that due to the mold mitigation project outside the sanctuary, the first floor restrooms are currently inaccessible. Please use the restrooms on the second floor or in the basement. All restrooms are wheelchair accessible, and you can reach them either by stairs or by the elevator, which is next to the front door. Before we begin our service, let's take a moment to wave to people watching from home, then rise and greet our neighbors or say hello in the chat. When you hear the singing bowl ring, please return to your seats. Emily Moores, would you please come forward to light our chalice this morning? We light our chalice today as a symbol of our work together, past, present, and future. Let us each allow this flame to remind us of who we are and to light our path forward together. Please rise now as you are willing and able for our first hymn, number 36 in the gray hymnal, When in Our Music. Please now welcome Emily Moores back to the front. She's going to tell us about our September Share the Plate recipient, Integrated Schools.
Thank you. So as many of you know, I am the co-chair with Molly for the RE committee. But what you may not know is that I am the Cincinnati chapter leader for an organization called Integrated Schools. Oh, do you have the slides? All right, so next slide. When you think back about your schooling experience and what it taught you about race, both at the time and in retrospect, just take a minute. In 2025, school-age children are more segregated than we were before Brown versus Board. What does it mean if modern segregation is increasing, but it's not because of laws dictated from the government? Next slide. Who is Integrated Schools? We are a growing grassroots movement of, by, and for parents who are intentionally, joyfully, and humbly enrolling our children in integrating schools. Our organization was founded as a response to the fact that white people created the problem of school segregation and thus bear a particular responsibility to redress the harm that it causes. Most of the time, when it comes to integration, parents are more uncomfortable than children. For example, my kids go to a public school that is 85% black and 98% food insecure. And while I have heard all the reasons why my school is a bad school, my children are thriving both academically and emotionally. Next slide. Oh, sorry. Okay, the link might not work. Okay, well, we can do the next slide. We can send it out. So this month, we are the organization of the month for donations, and the money donated by First Church during the month of September will go to supporting our very first in-person conference. Integrated Schools will be hosting chapter leaders from around the country in Columbus, Ohio, and the funds are going to help us pay for activist trainings and workshops and assistance for financial need for travel. These trainings will give us the ability to do our work better, advocating for racial equality, and also helping racially and socioeconomically privileged parents navigate how we show up. Thank you.
Please rise again as you are willing and able to sing. Oh, no. I'm sorry. Ushers, yes, come forward.
La 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 la. Everybody. La 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 la. What's happened to you? You used to be so shy. You used to hang your head down. You wouldn't look in my eyes. Did you see some great vision? Did you finally break through? Did you shake the foundations? Ah, what's happened to you? La 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 la. What's happened to you? You used to look so tired. Now there's a spring in your step, and your words are on fire. Did you hear some great secret? Did the words ring of truth? Did you rise from the ashes? What's happened to you? Where the four winds meet, the world is so still. The waves are not pounding, and the hungry are filled. Our shadows have crossed there, where the sun touched the ground. Together they're singing, oh, what a beautiful sound. They're singing, la, 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 la. La, 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 la. Everybody. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. What's happened to you? You used to be so unkind. You used to curse at this poor world. So what changed your mind? What stirred such compassion is a mystery to me. I don't know what's happened, oh, but I like what I see. Where the four winds meet, the world is so still. The waves are not pounding, and the hungry are filled. Our shadows have crossed here, and the word touched the ground. Together they're singing, oh, what a beautiful sound. They're singing, la, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. One more time. La, 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 la. La, 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 la.
Good morning, y'all. Oh, I feel like I haven't done this in a while. Does it feel like it's been a while? Yes. So I owe you a few hours, right? You got time today for a few hours? Congregational meeting will start about 2:30. Is that all right? Oh, somebody said it's all right. All right, I owe you coffee. Was that you, Ramona? All right. Oh, man, I feel rusty. It's been so long since I preached to you all that my tablet had to do like 3 updates before it would let me into it. And then it demanded a password before I could open my Word app, which I couldn't remember. So, I had it really together at 9:30, and at 9:59 I was sweating it out. But I think I'm doing all right. But I noticed we're all kind of rusty. Oh, there we go. Oh, wow. That's almost got a divine tone to it. I want you to build an ark. Oh my God, I guess I'm punchy, but all right. So, what's today about and what's next week about? Because I know everybody looks at the newsletter to find out what the sermon's going to be about, because church is all about the sermon, right? I know the newsletter has about a 50% open rate, right? And so at best, developmental minister these past couple of years and this coming year, I was thinking that we have accomplished a great deal. Are you all paying attention to the developmental goals that were established just upon my arrival 2 years ago? And how far we have come in accomplishing those goals? We are a very different congregation now than we were 2.5 years ago. And so it feels very good to sort of be in this place. But I realize, that not everybody lives and breathes by the sermons I do. And even if I knock it out of the park on occasion, I don't expect people to remember the things I say, because we all have very busy lives and our minds are full of all sorts of variables we have to keep in order to get through our days. And so I do circle around from time to time and come back to sermon topics I've done before, because sometimes I think it's necessary to hear things more than once before they sink in. And I hope that many of the things I say have an opportunity to sink in, because as I've explained before, I'm not an informational preacher. I'm not here to give you the next new bit of information to keep your mind occupied and maybe even entertained from Sunday to Sunday. I'm a transformational preacher, which is what developmental ministry is all about. It's about the transformation of a congregation from the culture it was to the culture it wants to become. And in order to do that transformational work, sometimes we need to hear things over and over and over again. And so I thought, let's begin this year by hearing some of these things over again. And so this week and next week, that's what we're going to do. I'm going to do sort of a recap of the 2 years of developmental ministry we've had together so far. And I originally said, for those of you who did read the newsletter, that I was going to recap year 1 today and next Sunday recap year 2, but I decided to divide it up more by themes. And so we're going to look at a few themes today that are theology related and justice related and related to our church as an organization, which actually comprise a lot of the developmental goals that were assigned to me in the board when I arrived. And next week, we're going to look at more of the spiritual and philosophical and psychological grist for the mill I've brought to our table. All right, so one of the things that is really appealing to Unitarian Universalists and really puzzling to non-Unitarian Universalists is our theology, or lack thereof. A lot of people struggle to understand who aren't Unitarian Universalists. You've heard this before. How in the world can you call yourself a religion when you don't have a sacred text, you don't have a creed, and the only requirement for membership is you ask people to sign a book? How is that a religion? People struggle with this who aren't UUs. But over my several decades of ministry now, I've come to realize that people who are UUs often struggle with this. We have a very hard time explaining our theology, not only to people who aren't UUs, but to ourselves. I've heard many of you say to me after I've touched upon this topic in a sermon, you know, I'd like to have more conversations about this because even though I'm a UU and even though it's very important to me, I'm still not sure what that means for me. And so one of the things I did last year, or maybe 2 years ago, I don't remember, I did a sermon called Religion Without a Net, so if we can cue up that image. Oh, they both came up at once, all right. So I did a sermon called Religion Without a Net. And in that sermon, I talked about my experience as a chaplain in the Children's Oncology Ward at Mott Children's Hospital in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And if you're doing clinical pastoral education with children in an oncology ward, your supervisor wants to really know that you have a pretty strong theological foundation from which to work, which, being a Unitarian Universalist, I didn't. So I found being in clinical pastoral education in the Children's Oncology Ward at the University of Michigan quite a challenge because A, I was very young, and B, being very young, I had little psychological or life trauma myself from which to draw, and these children who were much, much younger than me were already way ahead of me from the point of view of having life challenges they had to deal with. And so I had to encounter these young people who were facing cancer, many of whom didn't have much prospect of living. And I had no theology to stand on. And one day, I walked into the room of a young man named Andrew. He was about 10 years old. And Andrew and I were talking, and his mother was sitting in the corner of the room watching her son talk to the pastor. And at one point, I found myself really stuck because Andrew said to me, after talking about hockey and the nurses and the hospital food, said to me in a quiet voice, he said, "What happens?" And so I put the story up here, and I'm going to turn and read it. He said, "What happens?" in a soft voice. And I inquired back. I knew what he meant, but I was buying time. "Well, what happens when, Andrew?" And he said to me, "You know, what happens when you die?" And I paused for a moment, and I sat down on the edge of his bed, and I didn't say anything for about a minute, which I suspect is a long time to wait for an answer to that particular question if you're a 12-year-old boy. So I thought fast. Maybe I could get away with feigning the Lord's Prayer, but I couldn't remember how it went. So I held Andrew's hand and I looked into his eyes and I said, "Andrew, I don't know. I don't know." He didn't flinch, so I repeated it. "I don't know. But I do know this. I trust the universe. I trust that whatever happens will be okay no matter what that is. And we talked a while more, and when I left, he seemed at peace with himself because on a deeper level, we both knew that the answers to his questions weren't what was important. What was important was my willingness to step out on that religious high wire with him and dance without a net beneath us. Our easy God was gone, to quote James Kavanaugh. You can see, if you want to go back, so like I know you're going to go home and just binge on 7 of my sermons today after I give you the synopsis of these because it's important grist for the mill. But you can see the date on which I did that sermon if you want to go back and look at it on YouTube. But the gist of it is this. Unitarian Universalism is not a religion that provides you pat answers to existential questions, which is what most religions do. Unitarian Universalism insists that you wrestle with your existential demons on your own. And in the context of a covenantal community where we don't force creeds on each other and we support each other's personal journeys, that can be a struggle. But it's also very much a gift. It's a gift to be part of a religious institution that allows you to be the authority in your theological life and not some minister standing behind the pulpit, or some bishop sitting behind a chair, or some pope sitting in Rome, although that works for some folks. I don't know if our animations are going to work today or not, but let's go to the next slide, and this is again on theology. Let's see what our next slide does. I had these set to, our animations aren't going to work. That's okay. I had these set to show up, piece by piece as I got to them, so try not to read ahead of me as you look at the slide. Speaking of our theology, a lot of theology is rooted in a couple of ideas that I think are very destructive to the human psyche. A lot of theologies are rooted in the idea that we live in a universe of good and evil. And in fact, you hear certain people in the world today invoke evil as a justification for their counteroffensive of what they consider their goodness. And so there's like this metaphysical battle going on in the universe, and we are the pawn pieces to that metaphysical battle. This goes back a long way, especially in the Christian tradition. And during the Great Awakening, there was an itinerant minister named Jonathan Edwards who was really pushing Calvinist theology. And Calvinist theology, as I'm sure you all know, was very much rooted in the doctrine of the Trinity and in the doctrine of predestination or eternal damnation, and very classical Christian theological notions such as this. And a lot of our Unitarian and Universalist forebears pushed back on Calvinist theology. The Unitarians especially attacked the doctrine of the Trinity, and the Universalists especially attacked this notion of predestination or eternal damnation. But it really was current among Great Awakening preachers, and one of the most famous was Jonathan Edwards. And Jonathan Edwards did a sermon called Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. And he would go around the country preaching this sermon. You can Google that if you want. It's a rather long sermon. But in that sermon, he likens human beings to spiders or vermin who are being held over the pit of flaming hell by a very thin thread, only keeping us from burning asunder by God's grace. And he says in that sermon, for instance, the God that holds you over the pit of hell, much as one would hold a spider or some loathsome insect over the fire, abhors you and is dreadfully provoked. His wrath toward you burns like fire. He looks upon you as worthy of nothing else but to be cast into fire. O sinner, consider the fearful danger you are in. Now, back in the days of the Great Awakening, there wasn't much to speak of something called the scientific method. And so people didn't really have rational or empirical or scientific or philosophical understandings of how the universe worked. The universe was still very much a mystery. Where did we come from? Where do we go? What is our purpose of living on this world? And in the lack of any rational explanation of these things, these kinds of arguments were very compelling to people. And you can see why, if the only answer you have as to the nature of existence is that you come from God, we live in this dualistic metaphysical universe that is good and evil at the same time, and God is good and Satan is evil, and he runs hell and God runs heaven, and we're pawns in that game, and that's the only narrative about your understanding of what it means to be a human being there is. This is a very compelling argument. You better get it straight, because you're going to end up in one place or the other. And if you don't live the good life as laid out in the scriptures, you may very well end up burning in the flames of hell. And Jonathan Edwards used to get thousands and thousands of people coming to his sermons to hear this kind of thing. But our Universalist forebears especially pushed back on that, because they would read the Bible and they would say, you know, when we read the Bible, we don't read God that way. The God we read in the Bible is unconditionally loving. And it is totally inconsistent with a God who is unconditionally loving that God would torment the human beings that he created to inhabit the earth. And so the Universalists were among the first within the Christian tradition to radically change Christian theology and root it not in the fear of damnation, but in the unconditional love of God. And many of our Universalist forebears spoke about this. Most popular is Jonathan Murray, who is credited with having brought Universalism to America. Jonathan Murray articulates this theology like this: go out, go out, go out into the highways and byways and give the people something of your new vision. Talk about the unconditional love of God. Not bad marching orders for us today, is it? You may possess a small light only, but uncover it and let it shine. Use it to bring more understanding to the hearts and minds of men. Give them not hell, but give them hope and give them courage. Again, not bad marching orders for today. Do not push them deeper into their despair, but preach the kindness and everlasting love of God. I think we're still growing into that one even today, aren't we? As I watch my fellow UUs go about their business in the world today, I wonder how many of them are paying attention to Jonathan Murray. Are we pushing back with negativity and aggression and imposing our point of view on the world? Or are we inviting people into the unconditional love of God in a circle that embraces all humanity? I think we're still struggling with this one. So one of the things that Unitarian Universalists really like to work on, and one of the things that is part of the developmental goals that were handed to me, is racial justice. I mean, social justice in general, but in particular in this congregation, racial justice. And so I did a sermon very shortly after I arrived. I think it was in September, October, after I arrived a couple years ago, called One If by Land, Two If by Sea. And in that sermon, go ahead and, oh wow. All right, it might work this time. That was different. In that sermon, I begin that sermon by quoting Henry Wadsworth Longfellow in his poem, Paul Revere's Ride. And the poem begins like this: listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. On the 18th of April in 75, hardly a man is now alive who remembers that famous day and year. Does anybody remember that by any chance? Either the poem or the sermon? See, this is why I'm re-hitting these. It's like, I don't expect you to remember these from 2 years ago. If you do remember this, does anybody remember why I read that poem and where I went after? Tim?
There was another writer that night.
There were 5 other writers that night, and one of the other writers was? A woman. Yes, her name was Sybil. And another writer was African American. He was Wentworth Cheswell, and he was actually the first black American elected to public office in America. And they both rode to warn of the coming of the British on that night. And I think almost nobody knows it unless you teach history or you read a lot. Because the narrative is, it was the English colonists from Europe who did all the dirty work to free the colonies from the grip of England. But there were a lot of non-white people and a lot of non-males who contributed to the struggles of our colony. But we tend to tell it from the white male perspective. And so if you read the history books, with the exception of Howard Zinn, it's usually told from the story of white Anglo males. But white Anglo males are only part of the story. And the point of this sermon was to point out to you that whenever you hear a story, you're hearing a narrative that somebody's telling you that is always, to some extent, usually to a great extent, colored by their own personal bias. Let's go to the next quote on this slide. There's a philosopher named Mark Taylor that I invoked in this sermon, and Mark said, "You will notice a suspicion that has been gathering throughout our consideration of narrative. It is possible that there is more imagination in narrative than most people are willing to acknowledge. We tend to take the stories we hear as pretty factual. It doesn't cross our mind that they're just stories that somebody is casting. Consider the historian, for example. The historian's picture of the subject, whether that subject to be a sequence of events or a past state of things, appears as a web of imaginative construction stretched between certain fixed points. In other words, a historian, or let's use today's newscasters, so to speak, they're telling stories, they're giving opinions. And when they tell stories or give opinions, they usually label what they consider historical facts or maybe current facts that they present as objective. And they take those facts and they weave their story through the facts that they've chosen in order to create a narrative that will be compelling to you. Historians do this, thus the right of Paul Revere, and newscasters do this, hence MSNBC and Fox News. Happens all the time. And the thing that's really important here is anytime you hear a narrative, anytime you hear a storyline, it's important to recognize that whoever's writing the narrative or storyline has self-selected the points that are relevant to what they want to tell you. And in self-selecting those points, has chosen not to share other information with you. So there's a process of exclusion to justify the narrative being spun. And it's really important to remember this when we think about our racial justice work in the world today. There are other narratives that are really important to people who aren't part of the predominant culture. And I think it's incumbent upon us as people who are part of the predominant culture, for the 95% of you who are Anglo-white, that you recognize this and actually be very conscientious about it in our social justice work. Along these lines, I also did a sermon called Learning to Be White. Oh, it's doing it again. The magic I possessed when I created this PowerPoint, it's just astounding. You hit the next one, does it show up hopefully? All right. So in Learning to Be White, I talked more about racial justice, but I really wanted to get to this from the point of view of W.E.B. Du Bois. W.E.B. Du Bois was a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant man, as was Frederick Douglass. These are two African American figures in our history that you really ought to read at some point in time. In fact, I'm doing an adult ed class on W.E.B. Du Bois' notion of double consciousness, which I'm going to talk about here, I think in November. And I strongly encourage you to take that class so that we can continue to keep our commitment to social and especially racial justice in the forefront of our minds. W.E.B. Du Bois wrote, "It is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness. Can you kill that picture? Because I think it's sitting over. Any chance you can do that? You can't. I think it's sitting over part of my quote. So part of this quote will be paraphrased. It is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, this requirement of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt. One ever feels his two-ness, an American and a Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two strivings, two warring ideals in one dark body, whose strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder. And so what Du Bois is getting to there is this notion that if you're not part of the predominant culture, and when he was writing, frankly, the predominant culture was white males, you had to recognize, A, that you weren't part of the predominant culture, you're not a white male, and B, you had to figure out what was your place in society if you weren't part of the predominant culture, which means you had to not only experience your non-whiteness, you also had to try to get into the minds of white people who would look at you as non-white and see yourself from that vantage point so you could figure out how to survive and succeed in the culture. So there's a double consciousness going on there Du Bois is trying to explain to us. And I think this notion of double consciousness, which he laid out, what was it, Tim, 150 years ago or so? When did, not quite that long ago. Du Bois was early 20th century, was it? Yeah, like 100, yeah, about 100 years ago. And I think this is a notion that is very, very, very vitally important to everybody who wants to think about justice in today's world. If you're not part of the predominant culture, you must, by necessity, as a survival strategy, adopt double consciousness. And it's really important for us to remember that as we engage people in our work in the world. Oh, was there another quote on that? All right, so here's the point of that sermon. The point of all this, if you're a white person, is that nobody is born knowing they are white. This was the sermon, Learning to be White, okay? White people learn to be white. Do you remember that sermon? Just because white people established the predominant culture in this country doesn't mean they didn't learn to be white. But white people don't tend to think about this because they take whiteness for granted. But you were taught how to be white. If you're not a white person, the point of all this is that there is a process of becoming white of which most white people remain ignorant. And there is a cost to learning to be a white. I call it white blindness, which results from not needing to know anything other than how to be white. If you are white in this culture, you have an incredible privilege of not having to know anything other than how to be white. Because if you're not white, you have to know how to be that too. Double consciousness. Because the power structure is always in your favor. Stated a bit differently, unlike the double consciousness all black people and frankly all non-white people possess, white people possess singular consciousness. It is vitally important to remember that as you move through the world. All right, I want to talk a little bit about organizational transformation because that's also part of what developmental ministry is all about, and we have seen a lot of that here at First Church. Sometimes we celebrate it, and sometimes I'm finding it's coming at the chagrin of certain people. But change is hard. Change is hard. Can we go to the next slide? Oh, you can't read that one. This was one that I did. Go ahead and click on it. This is one I did where I invoked dinosaurs turning into birds. Do you remember this one? It's called, Why Do Birds Have Hollow Bones? I know I think of some pretty inane sermon titles for my sermons, but I was hoping it would help people remember. And I chose this because I wanted to use the transition of dinosaurs into birds as a metaphor for organizational transformation. An overall trend in skeletal evolution along the theropod branch is the hollowing out and lightening of bones. This was important in the evolution of a light airframe, allowing theropods to evolve into birds. Do you remember this sermon by any chance? Y'all knew that our birds are actually leftover dinosaurs? Right? Okay. What is the point of this ornithological history? The point is that environments change and organisms that evolve with their changing environments flourish. Those that do not expire. One of the reasons I became a developmental minister is because I discovered, being a settled minister long-term in congregations, that every time, virtually every time, I tried to move a congregation in direction A or B, there was great resistance, because congregations can be as resistant to change as individuals. Individuals are deeply wedded to their ego defense, and congregations or organizations and groups of people are also wedded to their quote-unquote ego defense. In other words, we have a culture, thank you very much. And even though we may complain about it, the truth is we kind of like it as it is. And so change is hard. And so, when I reached this point in my ministry, I realized, I have a lot of skill sets to be a change agent, but over the years I have found it hard for congregations to allow me to do that. So if I were to go into developmental ministry and minister to congregations that are intentionally looking for a change agent, I think I could help a congregation benefit from my skill sets of being a change agent and enjoy my engagement with the congregation more. And that's largely been true here at First Church. But it's also true that some of those changes have met the kind of resistance that I traditionally have met in settled ministries as well. It all depends on how deep in the system you want to reach when you pull a lever. But that's the nature of developmental ministry. And I have thoroughly enjoyed my developmental ministry with you so far, and I think that we have seen great progress together. Go ahead and throw up the next quote. And it's really hard to be a developmental congregation because you have a tendency, all congregations have a tendency to return to their set point. To allow change to a point, but then if change becomes too uncomfortable for us, there sort of tends to be like an abreaction, and the resistance in the system tries to resettle back to its set point. And it's hard to remember as a congregation or as an organization or as an individual sitting across from your therapist that you're paying $120 an hour for therapy for, that you are asking for the change agent to help you change. And to conscientiously remember to be open to and willing to do what's necessary for the change. And it can be frightening. It can be frightening. If you're really astute, you're wondering if I'm preparing you for more changes to come this year. Haven't we had enough? There's more coming. But I don't think they'll be as difficult this year. I think they'll be very positive for us all. So I wanted to leave you on this, and then there's one more to do real quick. Guillaume Apollinaire, who is a poet that I've tended to like over the years, and I quote him a lot, and I actually quoted him in my ministerial record sheet, and I think that is part of what helped me get the job with you all. I put this quote in my record sheet. "Come to the edge," he said. And they said, "We can't, we're afraid." "Come to the edge," he said. And they said, "We can't, we will fall." "Come to the edge," he said. So they came, and he pushed them, and they flew. All right, how are we doing for time? We're going to stop there because we must start the congregational meeting at a reasonable hour. And I'll save the next couple for next week. And so there you have it. If you want to check these sermons out, go home and binge on these sermons. If you go watch this sermon, you'll be able to see the dates that those were done. But I really want to encourage you, if you don't want to go watch all those sermons again, and I don't suspect most of you will, to maybe watch this one again. Because there's a lot of work still to do, even though we've come a long way. And these things that I've shared with you are still very relevant to the work that remains for us to do. All right, our last hymn this morning is 346. Come sing a song with me. Have I got that right? So if you would stand up, and if you remember my story about the Christian House of Prayer and Brother George and Sister Carol, if you would please sing this song in the spirit of Sister Carol, I would appreciate it, which means loud and robust, even if you think you can't sing. Please rise as you are able.
Emily, could you come and extinguish the chalice? Let us carry this flame, our flame, in our hearts and allow it to change whatever needs changing. Let's start with ourselves. There'll be no receiving line today, so we can get to coffee hour quickly and back in here for the congregational meeting. Thank you.
All right, y'all, listen to y'all mama. If y'all mama knows that the sky is blue. From last week, remember this? Van understands. Morrison, that is. Ooh, they sound good, don't they? Yes! When it's not always raining, there'll be days like this. When there's no one complaining, there'll be days like this. Everything falls into place like the flick of a switch. Well, my mama told me there'll be days like this. When you don't need to worry, there'll be days like this. When no one's in a hurry, there'll be days like this. When you don't get betrayed by old Judas' kiss. Oh, my mama told me there'll be days like this. When you don't need an answer, there'll be days like this. When you don't meet a chancer, there'll be days like this. When all the parts of the puzzle start to look like they fit, then remember, there'll be days like this right now, this moment. You know it's good. Do, 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 do. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. No, 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 no. When no one steps on my dreams, there'll be days like this. When people understand what I mean, there'll be days like this. When you ring out the changes of how everything is. Well, my mama told me there'll be days like this. Oh, my mama told me there'll be days like this. Oh, my mama told me there'll be days like this. Now, I want to testify real quick. This is a sweet struggle. You understand? I don't know Van. This ain't my kind of singing. I sing, though, to feel good, and I'm inviting you to do the same thing. Sing to feel good. We don't always sound good to other folk, but get over yourself. And that's what I'm saying about being you. This is a sweet struggle. Hope is hard. We need the change. And we need the courage. The boys was talking about double conscience. You're looking at triple conscience. And I'm going to live out loud. And I invite you to do the same thing. Feels real good. You get real rich. Thank you so much for listening.